Too often technology has simply been layered on top of what we were already doing and doesn't make it easier for the teacher or the principal or the school administrator. And so there has to be a lot more thought about, what is the problem we're trying to solve? Technology is not a solution per se. We have to first identify what we would call the hurdles.
Hey everyone, my name is Kyle Walgren, and this is another episode of The Business of Education. Today's guest is Keith Krueger. He is the Chief Executive Officer of the Consortium for School Networking, a nonprofit organization dedicated to representing K-12 school system technology leaders in North America. Under his leadership, CoSN, is that how you say that? CoSN?
It is.
Empowers the educational leaders leveraging technology effectively to create energizing learning environments or engaging learning environments. Look at me, I can't even read today, which isn't new. That's why I'm in the ed tech space. I grew up being a non-reader, built a product to teach kids how to read, and in my journey to learn more, that's why we've reached out to you. Keith, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Kyle. Great to be here.
Keith, all our research says that you're one of the leaders in ed tech in the United States. You're very highly recognized, actually quoted as one of the most influential figures in ed tech. How'd you get into the ed tech space, and tell us a little bit about your background?
Thanks, Kyle. My background is actually more both in policy and in building nonprofits, and started working with CoSN just about the 30 years ago when it was formed. The organization was created by the higher ed CIO organization, which is now called EDUCAUSE, and we spun out as a separate nonprofit for North America. And so we really focus as a professional association on kind of the human aspect of leadership around ed tech in the K-12 space.
That's awesome. It says 29 and a half years you've been over there. I would have never thought that ed tech would have been a big thing 30 years ago.
That was just at the moment that browsers, the commercial internet became available, and a few schools started to say, there is an educational opportunity here to connect. And so we were formed just as that was happening. Obviously, the defense sector and scientific community had the internet in the 80s, but it was just as it became more publicly available.
That's awesome. So obviously you've been involved with ed tech since the rollout of it, and you've seen every aspect of it. What are some of the biggest changes you've seen over the last 30 years that have kind of made you step back and went, wow, I can't believe we've actually got through that?
Well, I think when we started, we hoped to get, at least a connection to every school. And of course, the ubiquitous aspect of technology and the need, we were just, even a basic dial-up connection was what we fought for in the early days. And of course, now we talk about broadband and making it not only available at school, but making sure that kids have the connectivity and devices so that they can learn anywhere, especially at home, because that's where we see, at least in the United States, the biggest challenge.
Right. How much do you think you've seen that growth over the last, let's say, 4 years when COVID was kind of brought into us, and how much did that push schools to really get online?
It really was, and already in the United States, pre-pandemic, probably 60% of middle and high school students were in one-to-one environments. But overnight, in March of 2020, we saw a recognition that learning couldn't happen if we didn't use technology. And so, we're now well into the high 90% of schools, including at the elementary level, of students having access to a device and having connected classrooms and hopefully connected homes.
That's something that, I've always lived kind of rural, close to town kind of thing. So I've always had good internet. It wasn't until this year that we were actually visiting a school where their streaming was behind. It completely blew my mind that there was any schools left, but it is still a small problem. Like you're saying, that schools aren't completely connected. All kids aren't on one-to-one devices. but we
Yep.
have seen that amazing growth. What do you think was one of the biggest obstacles or hurdles trying to get, especially young kids, on devices?
I think I don't think the problem is the kids. The challenge is adults, teachers, and I'm not saying it's a problem, but they're used to doing things in old ways, and
Mm-hmm.
so thinking about new ways to do teaching and learning that actually improve the teaching and learning and that actually make life easier. And I'll be very honest that too often technology has simply been layered on top of what we were already doing and doesn't make it easier for the teacher or the principal or the school administrator. And so there has to be a lot more thought about, what is the problem we're trying to solve? Technology is not a solution per se. We have to first identify what we would call the hurdles and then define how the technology or tool, and really it's just a tool, uh, you know, uh, books were a tool in the Renaissance time. Paper was a tool, uh, and blackboards, with chalk were a tool. So, what is it that fundamentally is going to transform and improve the process of learning? And how do we more individualize it? That's been the holy grail of education technology, that we could somehow really individualized learning experience for students. And that right now is totally the buzz around artificial intelligence. That maybe for once we've gotten to the point where what we do for special needs kids with a individualized learning plan could actually scale. But that's only going to happen if we are very clear and intentional and find ways to do it in a way that makes sense for teachers and principals and superintendents.
Oh, Keith, you're talking my language. Um, so much good stuff there. One, layering on, we're just layering on solutions onto what we're already doing. I feel like is a big problem. I'm not sure if you know much about the company that we have. Edsum is an AI reading tool that identifies weaknesses in real time for the individual, and then we provide interest driven content to help identify those weaknesses and work on those weaknesses for the individual, so we can bring students up together instead of bringing the top down and bottom up to the middle. We can do it. Everybody can grow at their own space. But one of the challenges that we have is that the schools have so much stuff that they have to get done that adding this tool is just layering on top of all the other stuff.
Right.
So we're seeing this. I'm seeing this, experiencing this in real time. But you also said that you spent the majority of your career with policy. Is this
Mhm.
something that policies can help? Is it, where do you feel like teachers are going to be able to let something go in order to bring in that tool and really utilize it without still continuing to feel overwhelmed?
Well, it's a great question. And, policy again can either help or hinder what we're trying to really accomplish. There have been in the United States some great policy, 30 years ago, or well, 20 some years ago, with the E-rate program,
Uh-huh.
where one of the reasons that schools are connected is because when we pay our telecommunications bill, there's an extra little line that says universal service. Now, that universal service actually dates back 75 years ago to connect telephone service to rural America. Well, we expanded that for schools and libraries, and about $4 billion goes into connecting schools and libraries in the United States. So we're more connected at the school and library level than, or as much as anywhere in the world. Um, as I said earlier, the challenge though isn't just at school, but
Mhm.
making sure that it happens. So that's a good. The E-rate program is a good example of good policy that made possible. We can have all these wonderful things, but if we don't have the connectivity and devices to do it, we won't get very far. Now you're asking about artificial intelligence, and it raises all kinds of questions about what kind of assessments are we doing, what kinds of which are driven by policy. And so, what are we going to allow or not allow? And, um, you know, there's a lot of anxiety around cheating with AI. uh, my first question to a teacher or a school administrator would be, do you have an academic integrity policy already? It if kids, and Stanford University did some research this last year looking the year before ChatGPT and the year after,
Mm-hmm.
and they found that there was a lot of cheating already happening. In fact, it was the same level. Kids may be using new tools to do it. So the problem wasn't that AI created cheating. They have so what we need to do is to look at policies, for instance, on academic integrity, and think about, with the power and of these new generative AI sort of tools, what is it that we want students to do or not do, and when can they do it, and what do they have to disclose?
That's such good stuff, and I I use AI almost every day. I use AI to do the research on my guests.
Mhm.
I use ChatGDP for that every time. Where I really find ChatGDP to be helpful is to help me reframe questions maybe sometimes, or like how to look at an answer differently so I can understand it. Kids are smarter than us, I feel like. So
Yeah.
I think that it's not worrying about kids cheating with AI from a personal standpoint, but for us being able to keep up and teach them how to use it in a way that we can understand, I think is going to be one of the biggest hurdles. I've got kids from 10 to 4 or 10 to 2, I mean, and my 2 year old's just as savvy on an iPad as my 10-year old. So we know that they're going to be okay with it. But another big thing that I use it is like how to give somebody the foundation of what I'm trying to get across, especially if I'm talking to, say,
Mhm.
like a lawyer negotiating a contract. Before, I'd spend a lot of time on the phone going back and forth. Now I put the items into ChatGDP and ask it to organize it and make sure that it makes sense to me and send it over. So it is a tool. And I think when people dive into it and learn that it's not just giving you everything that you want right off the hop, it'll break that barrier down a little bit. But there is a lot of learning in it. What do you think one of the biggest advantages that generative AI can bring into the classroom?
Well, we just did a national survey, the state of ed tech, and for the first time asked our audience of chief technology officers, CIOs, what do you see as the opportunity? And productivity
Mm-hmm.
was the number one answer. uh, the ability to personalize education was the second highest answer. We also asked them what their biggest concerns were, and for our audience, again, they're not teachers, but their number one concern was around cybersecurity. That
Okay.
this new capability could be used against school districts to gain access to data, and so while I think you're right that we need to look at the opportunities, we also have to realize there are risks. And so we need guardrails around privacy of data, making sure that things are kept in a safe and secure way, making sure that the answers we're getting, we understand the biases that, it's not generative AI isn't creating the data, it's using the data that we already have. So if we
Mm-hmm.
live in a biased world, the answer is going to be biased again. If
Right.
we ask it to generate an image of a homemaker, it'll probably show a woman. So we should understand what the biases are of our incumbent databases, and we need to be. We were talking earlier about the ability to more personalize learning. That's exciting, but boy, you better make sure that every teacher understands that you can't put personally identifiable information into the open internet,
Yeah, for
or
sure.
or you're
Oh,
or
and they
you're
do
just
it nonstop.
yeah. And so we've got a lot of education. You know, MIT just did some new research, and they looked at what the productivity possibilities in any industry sector, not just K-12, and they found that if you provide training, you get a 40% increase in productivity by a but if you don't provide any training, it drops to half of that, about 20%. And if you ban it, you don't get any of that improvement.
Right.
So the worst is if we ban it, but
Mm-hmm.
we're not doing so well if we don't train teachers or give them the opportunity to experiment and learn like you are.
No, I love that. And I agree with it 100%. The Do you think from a bandwidth standpoint, is this something that it's like they add into professional development? How do you think we get a little bit more bandwidth for those teachers? Because we know that they're overworked. You know what I mean? They're all.
We do need to provide some training, but we also need to provide just time. And I think we need to give examples of how it improves. There's kind of a rolling of eyes by teachers that this is just one more technology on top of all that I'm already doing. But you just gave some examples of how it makes you a more productive business person.
Mhm.
We need similar examples of, when teachers are doing maybe development of their lesson plans, or maybe in the area on the administrative side of, how can we save time in doing, even some of the administrative things like bus schedules and
Mhm.
cafeteria plans and the overall school agenda. I mean, those things are ripe for productivity improvements. And school districts aren't inherently about productivity. We don't give money back to our shareholders. But if we can give time back to teachers, that's a huge improvement.
That's how I sell my product every day. I say, but my number one goal is to give you time back in the classroom to focus on, what you came here to do. We know that you guys have the ability to teach. You spend the majority of your time identifying. Let's give you more time to teach, and I think that would make it a better, fun environment for the teachers and the students. And we do focus on how our company works. Is we do focus on uh, putting the information together for teachers to be able to then do it. You said, or then identify those challenges within the reading curriculum. The one thing that you said was biases in AI, and I think we seen that the other day with Google. Google had some issues generating some images that had some biases in it. I think that's probably a good way for teachers to see if students are using AI to grow or using AI to cheat, because those biases are going to be implemented into that technology. We still haven't worked it out perfect where that stuff's not coming in naturally, right? So if the kids aren't doing their research, I think it'll come out really easy in the
Yeah.
wash.
Literacy, I think, in an AI driven world, asking critical questions about where did this information come from, and expecting that the AI we use provides citation of how did they generate that information.
Mm-hmm.
And you know clearly we're going to see a lot of fake uh, generative video and voice, and that's going to be a huge challenge for society. So the only one of the answers to that is making sure that we have a more literate citizenry, and students are the start of that.
I think that I'm glad that you said that. I think that if we could increase literacy as a whole, we can make not just school better, but you know
The world better.
the world better. I think like, and I don't come from education completely open. I only actually got to grade 9 before I quit, but I quit because I couldn't read, and I had gone through school being bullied due to my inability to read, and it just wasn't a good place for me. And I went down a lot of paths as a student, you
Mhm.
know, my decisions, but I think it reaches back to those challenges around literacy. So I think that anything we can do to help kids read just makes a better society. Period. It's
Yeah.
traced back to so many different things, and ultimately, that's my goal: is to share the light on that where we can um, make improvements by just increasing literacy. It's a simple thing: increase literacy, and all these other problems get better. In my
Yeah.
opinion, a big
Yeah.
chunk of them. Consortium for School Networking. How does your organization empower school leaders to leverage technology for creating engaging environments?
Well, I think first of all, we create community. So,
Mm-hmm.
well, as a professional association, we're all about, what are the skills that technology leaders in school systems need to know. We created, gosh, over 20 years ago, a framework for what that skill set looks like. Certainly, you need to understand the technology, as you would in any industry sector. But you also have to understand the educational environment. What are we trying to do that has an impact on teaching and learning? And finally, if you're going to be a head of technology, we need to start thinking of it from a leadership perspective and reporting into the superintendent, making sure that you understand the policies and vision and leadership skills that are needed. So that framework of essential skills has become our uh, basis for our certification, the Certified Education Technology Leader, CETL, and we now have over 1,000 individuals who have achieved that, including some from Canada and outside of the United States, because it's really the first practice-based certification for EdTech leaders. So that's certainly a key start. We also have a whole variety of research, which the reason that it's the work that we do is so useful and practical is that we start with our members. What is the problem you're trying to solve?
Mm-hmm.
Then we ask them who would like to raise your hand and help us build it. We're not a separate company. We that's building something for. Rather, it's ed tech leaders, CIOs, CTOs coming together to build things that are checklists and doing case studies and toolkits on key issues, things like cybersecurity or privacy of student data, or how do you have a digital equity initiative that meets the needs of all kids. So that's, I think, what's unique and different about a professional association is, uh, you know, we, we start with what are your needs? You help us build the resources for that, and then those same people who built it are in fact the customers. So that loop is very tight.
That's awesome. You mentioned research. You have spent some time doing some research or studying with Harvard on digital equity. You mentioned both of those in that thing. Can you elaborate a little bit more on digital equity and how you see that
Yeah.
progressing as we move forward?
And that we started working on this in 2015, so pre-pandemic, and I think we realized that uh, our traditional language was around at school connectivity, and increasingly outside of school was equally important. The research we've been doing around that is there are lots of surveys about unconnected students and families, but what we have uniquely done is taken actual data from the school network and looked at what the experience was of students in the middle of the pandemic at the height of remote learning. And what we quickly learned was that many students, even if they had a connection, had a device, had bad experiences.
Mm-hmm.
For instance, school districts were purchasing uh, the cheapest device that, in fact,
Mm-hmm.
was not designed for what we're doing today with video conferencing. We also found that the standards for what a connected house were perfectly fine for watching, for instance, a Netflix movie, 20 megabits down and three up. Well,
Mm-hmm.
the not to get geeky, but the three up didn't even work for one person, let alone when mom and dad and two kids or three kids were working from home. So that data has influenced our Federal Communications Commission, and they just 2 months ago updated what a highly connected home is based on that data. We also last year wanted to know, does it make any difference? Kids are mostly back at school around the world, but when we looked at actual use of the school network, more connectivity happens from outside the school than at school during school hours.
That makes sense.
And the families, the kids that are not connected, are the poorest, low income families, which are disproportionately Black and Hispanic in the
Mm-hmm.
United States. So we have a real huge equity problem. We also found that it's particularly a problem at the high school level, where a third of students are either unconnected or underconnected, and underconnectivity is a major emerging problem. So that brings us to some new work that we've just done this year. There's a lot of publicly available data from our census department, broadband data like from something like Ookla. There's poverty kinds of data, but none of those things really align, at least in the United States, to school district boundaries. So we've taken all that publicly available data and aggregated it and aligned it to school district boundaries so that you can now look at your school district and go down to the lowest level possible, which might be by census tract or uh, by zip code, and you can compare yourself to other similar school districts for and see the correlation between connectivity and, say, health outcomes, because these things are interrelated. And maybe with that information, you can then work with your health department or your or community organizations that are trying to fix a number of problems with the same populations, which are largely poor families.
No, that really resonates. When Shaquille became a partner in Ed Soma, one of the things that he was wanting us to solve was making sure that kids in underfunded communities and inner city communities really had the opportunity to grow and learn. And that's something that we've been focused on. But one of the things that you'd pointed out, that those schools are usually less funding, the connectivity is not as good. What are some strategies that you think you could recommend to ensure that technology is integrated into those areas a little bit better, making a more equitable opportunity for kids or schools to have the same opportunities to grow and learn? I think AI could really help those districts, right? So how do we make sure that we get that?
Well, I think for a digital equity strategy, first of all, being intentional as you implement technology, that you have a plan to scale it and make sure it's done in an equitable way. That doesn't mean you don't test it out in a limited number of classrooms or in a sandbox of area to see if it works. But once you start to see what is working, do you have a plan to bring that to every schools, every classroom, every student, every family? And I think involving the community is also critical. Um, the families that we're talking about that are unconnected or underconnected or are the ones that are disproportionately poor, and those are the ones that have the same sort of health outcome challenges. They need telemedicine. They need so building a broader based coalition, with public officials, with nonprofits in the community to address these issues of connectivity. Um, we have to not just think of the silo of education, but how can we work in community?
No, I like that community. We often say, when we're talking to parents or teachers, that literacy rate or literacy levels are improved when you bring a village together to work on them. It's not just one person. I think that goes across the whole school
Yeah.
gamut of things, that we need, just as much support from the parents and the community leaders to really help grow and take these things to the next step. over the next few years, how do you see ed tech evolving in schools, and how do you think that CoSN is going to play a huge role in shaping that?
Well, one of the things that we do annually is called the Driving K 12 Innovation, and it's a global research project. Uh, and we've done it for 15 years. It used to be called the Horizon K 12 Report. But the idea is we ask a group of experts.
Mm-hmm.
So we have last year we had about 140, and 70% were from North America, US and Canada, but the other 30% were from around the world, because innovation isn't bounded by the Atlantic and Pacific Ocean. So and we organize the work in three buckets. The first bucket is, what is the hurdle that we're trying to accomplish? What are we trying to overcome? What's the why?
Mm-hmm.
And those. that's important to start with. And we try to identify the top three hurdles that we think right at this moment that the education system is trying to accomplish, trying to overcome. The second area is accelerators. What is changing in the world? For instance, the use of more personalized experience, or uh, there's a whole variety of things that happen uh, that change the expectation of what teaching and learning are. And what are those top three accelerators? And then third and finally, we look at the technology, what we call tech enablers. And that it's important to focus on what the technology is, but we think technology leaders too often start with the technology rather than what the hurdle is we're trying to overcome and how the world is changing.
Right. I think a
So
lot of people put barriers up on technology. I'll give you an example. You get on a Zoom call and that Zoom call drops or flops. Nobody questions it, right? We're all okay with that. You go into a school, from my experience, they have, bandwidth issues or something of that nature, and speech technology makes a mistake. All of a sudden, that technology is like X right away. Oh, you can't make that mistake. We don't look into, why that mistake might have happened. Was there a broadband issue? Was there a
mhm.
server issue? Did you have poor devices like you touched on earlier? We just automatically X the technology and don't give it a second chance. But we allow these errors in our day to day life to take place and never second guess them. So opening up technology and giving it a chance to grow, I think, is going to be really crucial over the next few years, to really expand into these opportunities where we can give time back to teachers. So we need them to be patient and work with us so we can help work with them. One of the things that I like to end the show with, Keith, and you talked about community a lot, is the importance of your network. I don't think that we can do any of this stuff that we talked about today without a network. How important is your network, and how do you utilize that to all our young listeners?
Well, ironically, the name of our organization is the Consortium for School Networking, and over the years, I think probably when that was started, they were thinking about wires and
Mm-hmm.
getting schools connected. But we've not given up that name because we think it certainly we are about technology, but we are more importantly about the human network. And so, as a professional association, finding peers that you can um, ask what the challenges they're facing and what are the solutions that they're trying. And I want to come loop back to what you were talking about failure,
Mm-hmm.
and that sometimes school systems are so risk adverse, they're saying we can't fail. Well, we have to find we from a leadership perspective, we need to give the opportunity to learn from what doesn't work. We used to do, we call it fail fest, where we'd ask people to talk about something they tried with technology that didn't work, but what they learned from it.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe a better term is failibration,
I like
celebrating.
that.
And so I think we need to have that mindset. Now we have to do it in safe ways,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe it's in testing things out in sandboxes, but wait we can't not learn from things that are not quite working. And we know in the technology area that products get better and better. The artificial intelligence we see today at this moment, at this hour, is the worst we're ever going to see.
It
It's
is.
going to be better tomorrow, next week, next year, and probably whatever I say about what its functionality in is going to miss even the people who invented great breakthroughs. Thomas Edison with electricity said there would be little use for AC current. People who invented the mobile phone didn't see that it would ever replace landline phones. So we have to be very humble, I think, in saying where we sit today, we might not fully understand all of what's possible, but we have to keep asking questions, iterating, and staying open to change.
I like that. If we look at literacy levels in the United States alone, we're at an all-time low. You look at places like Chicago, where I think it's like, under 30% of their student population reads at grade levels. So right now is a great time for literacy tools to come in and help assist, as long as we let them. So uh, I would love to be able to see and watch how that goes. But Keith, I appreciate your time so much for coming on the show. You taught me a lot. If any of our guests watching this show wanted to reach out or ask any questions or get in touch with you and your organization, what's the best way for them to do that?
Sure. Well, start with our website, CoSN.org, and there's all kinds of ways to contact us. But my email is Keith, Keith, at CoSN.org.
Keith, thank you so much. I look forward to getting this show aired and having you on the show again. I learned a lot today, and I know that I'm going to learn a lot more in the future. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Have a good day.